My name is Hannah Walker, 34 years old. I landed back in Boston with the kind of tired that sits in your bones, the kind you earn after 8 months of living inside blueprints and deadlines in Philadelphia. My head had been at home for weeks, the thin shaft of afternoon light that hit my kitchen table just so, the exact pitch of the skylight I'd fought the contractors for, the narrow bookshelves I had built myself and stained at midnight. My townhouse on Commonwealth Avenue was not a vanity. It was my ledger of every sacrifice, every late night, every small victory that proved I could make something out of nothing. I drove a rental from Logan with a small private excitement in my chest, a private domestic joy. And then I saw the moving truck. It blocked my driveway like an accusation. Two men in overalls were carrying a mid-century armchair across my threshold as if they'd spent years living in my head. I double-checked the house number with shaking hands, 47 Commonwealth Avenue. My heart did something like a stutter. Keys jingled in my palm, the sound suddenly obscene. The lock didn't give. My key, the one that fit the grooves like a secret, was useless. When the door opened, the woman who stepped out looked at me with that flat, appraising stare, strangers reserve for problems they do not want to solve. She was in her 40s, a crisp blazer, the kind of person who could roll out of a real estate listing and into court without breaking a sweat. "Can I help you?" she asked, polite and immediate. Everything you hate about civility when it contains bad news. "This is my house. I am Hannah Walker." My voice sounded thinner than I felt. She blinked, confused for a half second, then called her husband over. Files were produced, a deed, stamped, legal, dated 2 months earlier, signatures and a notary seal like a compact that sealed the air from me. The page said my townhouse had been sold for $500,000. My name appeared nowhere. The documents were neat, clinical, indifferent. Someone else's life had been laid on top of mine. I sank to the curb, and the world narrowed to plastic trash bags lined like tiny graves. Clothes, my sketchbooks, portfolios, damp from last night's rain, slumped out into the gutter like evidence. I dug. Fingers numb, I found the frame from my first job, a photograph of me at 26, in front of a community library I'd designed, proud enough to peer into an uncertain future. The glass was spiderwebbed. The picture clutched to my chest was as human as the betrayal felt. Where was my car? I asked the new owners, the question evaporating into the afternoon. Their shrug was small, professional. No car came with the house. My black sedan, paid for the year before with my savings, was gone. The thought hit cold. They had not only sold the structure that held my life, they had stripped its contents and given away the shape of my days. I called my parents and my brother until my thumbs cramped. No answer. The silence felt deliberate, a thing that had been practiced. A memory flickered. My mother holding a stack of forms at my doorway before I left for Philadelphia, saying something about taxes and maintenance. I must have signed, distracted and trusting. Little lies start that way, with a stamped please sign and the sound of luggage wheels. My spare key had been in their possession for years. People keep keys to people they love. They also keep them to objects they are used to moving. Newton, their house, looked exactly the way it always had. White shutters, neat lawn. But the front door swung open to a domestic scene that was suddenly foreign. George Ramsay and Pamela Ramsay sat like a painting you could no longer recognize, faces practiced into a polite blandness. My brother Gavin was not there. "Mom, Dad, why did you sell my house?" I did not sit. My hands would not let me be gentle. Pamela's voice softened into a careful thing. "Hannah, we had no choice." George's jaw tensed as if molded from the habit of authority. When they speak in practiced halves, they believe it will disguise the breaking. Gavin owed money. Those words are light and deadly together. $500,000. Gambling debts. The numbers felt absurd until they resolved themselves into faces. The men who make threats, the slick emails, a debtor's deadline. "You sold my house? My car? You threw my things into the street." Rage was a cold thing, precise, and it moved through me like architecture, measuring, calculating. My parents' eyes watered, my mother's hand hovered, ready to plead. He's our son, Hannah. We had to protect him. We couldn't let them hurt him. They had made a decision for me, the way someone might decide whether to demolish a building because it has become inconvenient. The demolition was done. My life was rubble. The story that followed was familiar in its shape. Gavin is special. Gavin is fragile. Gavin will be the one to carry the family name. A litany of excuses I'd heard my whole life. 1,000 small slights built a house that had always placed him at the center. The bicycle stolen when I was 10, the replaced car at 16, the repairs paid for after he drove drunk. Parental affection had been a distributive ledger that never balanced in my favor. I had been the competent child, the fixer, the one who would always be expected to give. I laughed at my mother then, a bitter sound with no humor. Did you think I would understand? Did you think erasing my life would feel like charity? My father's voice, suddenly loud, accused me of selfishness. Family comes first, he said, and there it was. The old argument with its clean moral edges. But family had never been fair. It had been a favor that never came due. I drove away before the apology could be practiced into sounding convincing. In a hotel that night, I sat in the lamplight cataloging every moment I'd stopped asking for help because I feared being a burden. Memory is public records for the heart. Each one I opened revealed a pattern. I had been the one to fight, to study, to leave Newton at all costs, to become an architect. Gavin had been the son whose disasters required rescue. I felt both fury and a strangling exhaustion that had nothing to do with distance or design. It was structural, rooted in how a family could allocate love like a budget and leave you bankrupt. The next day, a text from an unfamiliar number came like a secret knocking. Julie Morgan, Gavin's ex. She said she knew what had happened to my house and insisted we meet. I've learned the world keeps its strangest truths in cafes, so I went to the thinking cup and found her where the light hit the table like a spotlight. Julie was smaller than the version of her I remembered, but she had a steadiness that came from being burned and still walking. "You were sold out," she said without preamble. Her voice, steady, carried an inventory of facts I wasn't ready for. Forged documents, a notarized power of attorney I had never authorized, emails where Gavin bragged about fixing the paperwork. She slid a USB drive across the table like a placard of accusation. On it, she said, there were texts, emails, scanned documents, the messy paperwork of betrayal. I looked at the little device and felt the shape of a new plan congealing. "If you want to fight this," she said, "you need to start by admitting you were lied to." Sitting back, the cafe noise swelled around me, with all the mundanity of ordinary life going on while my own had been stolen. Julie's presence was both a kindness and a warning. Truth can save you, but it can also hurt you. I slid the drive into my bag and left with a new, impatient energy. Someone might have thought I would cry, file, and forget. That was not me. I had been built to make things stand, and I would either make something stand for myself now, or I would watch, this time from the inside out, as yet another piece of my life was taken. Outside the cafe, a figure shifted near the curb, a man in a dark jacket whose posture suggested he'd been following for a stretch of street. For a heartbeat, the city held its breath and then exhaled. He melted into traffic. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that being followed was the kind of detail glamorous novels use to frighten their heroines. Still, the hair along my forearms prickled. There are architectures of danger that begin like small cracks and widen until they take down the whole building. I slid the USB into my pocket and felt the weight of possibility. I wasn't going to wait for them to call me a villain for defending myself. I started the car with a new, purposeful calm. I was going to find a lawyer. I was going to get my life back. I thought then, privately, like calculating the angle of a sunbeam, that some betrayals do not just take things away. They reveal the true layout of the person who betrayed you. And once you see the floor plan, you can work out where the foundations are rotten. I met with a lawyer the next morning. His name was Benjamin Larson, a quiet, thoughtful man I'd gone to architecture school with before life sent us on different highways. He'd become the kind of lawyer who handled disputes like mine, property, inheritance, the ugly architecture of family money. When I finished telling him everything, the sale, the forged papers, the half answers from my parents, he sat back, studying me like he was reading blueprints. Do you have any idea who notarized those documents? No, I said, but Julie thinks the notary was bribed. Benjamin exhaled slowly, tapping his pen against his legal pad. Then your parents didn't just cross a moral line, Hannah. They crossed a criminal one. His words should have felt satisfying. They didn't. The word criminal sounded like a wrecking ball. That night, I drove to my parents' house again. This time, I wasn't coming as a daughter. The air in the Ramsey house was heavy with the quiet comfort of people who believed they were right. My mother was folding laundry. My father was reading the paper. For a moment, I almost believed the 8-year-old version of myself would walk in behind me, drop her backpack, and wait for someone to look up. They both froze when they saw me. Don't, I said, before my mother could start her soft apologies. Don't pretend you didn't know what you were doing. My father set the paper aside, his voice firm, unflinching, the same tone that used to end every childhood argument. Your brother needed help. We couldn't let him get hurt. You were away for months, and the bills were due. We had to move fast. You sold my life to pay for his mistakes. My voice cracked. It wasn't just anger. It was grief. The kind that leaves no air between words. Pamela reached out a trembling hand. We thought we'd tell you once things settled. Gavin promised to pay you back. I laughed. You actually believed him? The silence that followed was louder than shouting. The conversation spilled into the kitchen, the same one where my father used to make me promise to be the good one. The smell of detergent, the hum of the refrigerator, it all mocked me with the ordinariness of betrayal. Do you even hear yourselves? I said. You've done this my entire life. He wrecks, I rebuild. He lies, you cover. He falls, I pay. And now, I gestured toward the floor, toward the invisible blueprint of what they'd taken. Now you've stolen the only thing that was mine. My father's face hardened. We did what we had to do. Dad, you forged my signature. That made him look up. His lips parted, just slightly, a flicker of guilt, or maybe shock that I knew. Pamela's voice trembled. It wasn't like that. Gavin said you'd agreed before leaving. I stared at her. You honestly think I'd agree to sell my house for a gambling debt? No one answered. There's a silence that lives only in families, the kind that remembers old fights, old wounds. It stretched between us, long and thin, until I could barely breathe. My father finally spoke again. You've always been ungrateful. We gave you everything. Your education, your start, that house. That house I bought with my money, Dad. My work, my designs. You didn't even come to the opening of my first project because Gavin had a hangover. He stood then, tall, shaking, angry in the way only pride can make a man angry. You think your success makes you better than us? No, I said, voice low. It just makes me free, and that's what you can't stand. My mother started crying softly. My father turned away, jaw locked. When I finally turned to leave, my mother's voice broke behind me. You'll understand one day, Hannah. We didn't just save him from debt, we saved him from something worse. I paused in the doorway. What's worse than destroying your own daughter's life? She didn't answer. Outside, the night was cold and still. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. If you keep digging, you'll regret it. No name, no signature, just that. I stood on the sidewalk staring at the words, the wind lifting strands of my hair, the glow of my parents' windows behind me, warm, distant, unreachable. Something inside me shifted then, a click, like a lock finally breaking. This wasn't just betrayal, it was conspiracy, and I was done being the good daughter. The hotel room had the stillness of a place that belonged to no one. Beige walls, a single buzzing light, a bed that smelled faintly of detergent. I sat on the edge of it with my laptop open, staring at the blank document titled Statement of Claim. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but no words came. You'd think anger would make action easy. It doesn't. It paralyzes. I had spent my life fixing what others broke. Now there was nothing left to repair except myself. At 2 a.m., sleep was still a myth. I found myself scrolling through old photos. Birthdays, college, the first day I bought the townhouse. Gavin's smile was in all of them. Easy, wide, careless. I remembered how he could charm his way out of anything. He was the golden son. I was the reliable one. The formula was perfect until I stopped playing my part. A memory came sharp and clean. Summer 2003. I was 14. Gavin was 16. drunk for the first time, standing in the driveway, swaying. My father's voice cut through the night. "Go upstairs, Hannah." I'd obeyed. Always. But from the window, I watched them drag Gavin into the house, whispering about how no one could ever know. The next morning, my mother was humming while making pancakes as if nothing had happened. That was how it always went. Secrets dressed up as mercy. Forgiveness traded for silence. Another memory. The year I left for college, Gavin borrowed my tuition deposit to bet on a football game. My father wired me more money, said Gavin was just finding his way. When I graduated with honors, they sent flowers, but didn't come. Gavin had totaled his car that week. I used to tell myself it wasn't favoritism. It was love expressed unevenly. Now I understood it was dependence. They needed someone to rescue, and I wasn't willing to drown for it anymore. The next morning, I went back to the cafe to meet Julie again. She was already there, a paper cup in front of her, sunglasses hiding eyes that had clearly cried all night. "You were right," I told her. "They forged it, all of it." She nodded, unsurprised. I knew Gavin was desperate, but I didn't know how far he'd go until too late. I studied her, the edge of guilt in her voice, the way she kept twisting the ring on her finger. "Why tell me now?" She looked up. "Because he's not just in debt, Hannah. He's in danger." The words hit harder than I expected. What kind of danger? Julie hesitated. The kind that doesn't end with an apology. He owed money to people who don't forgive. I felt my pulse quicken. "And my house?" "Collateral," she said. "He told them it would be taken care of. When I found out, I left. I couldn't be part of it." I leaned back, the air in the cafe too tight. "So my parents didn't save him. They saved themselves." Julie nodded. "He was threatened. They panicked. He convinced them selling your place was the only way to keep him alive." That word, alive, lingered. That night, I went through the USB she'd given me. Hundreds of files. Emails, PDFs, photos of forms. And there it was. A scanned document dated May 4th. A power of attorney with my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The forger had tried to mimic the curl of my R, the upward slant of my Y, close enough to fool anyone who didn't know me. But I knew my own hand. Then, an email thread between Gavin and a notary named Ronald Keyes. "Gavin, she won't be around to ask questions. Just make it look official. Ronald. Understood. Send the bonus when it's done." $15,000 transferred 2 days later from my father's account. My stomach turned. When I looked up, it was nearly dawn. The city outside was still dark, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your heartbeat. The realization came slowly, like light creeping under a door. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even just betrayal. It was about control. Every decision they had ever made, for me, had really been about keeping me where they needed me. Compliant, grateful, predictable. And now they'd gone too far. I sent Benjamin the documents at 6 a.m. His reply came within minutes. "Meet me at the office. Don't talk to your parents again without me." I closed my laptop, packed my things, and caught my reflection in the mirror, hair tangled, eyes red, but posture straight. There's a strange calm that comes after the storm of disbelief. The moment you stop hoping it's all a misunderstanding. That's when you finally become dangerous. Benjamin's office was quiet when I arrived. Early sunlight spilling across stacks of case files and a pot of stale coffee. He looked up from his desk, tie loosened, expression heavy. "I went through everything you sent," he said. "It's bad, Hannah. Really bad." He turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was a chain of documents. My forged signature, the notary license belonging to Ronald Keyes, and a deed transfer that had been filed through a private escrow service. Every piece fit too neatly to be accidental. "Your brother couldn't have pulled this off alone," Benjamin continued. "He had help, and not just from your parents." I stared at the name Ronald Keyes and felt my stomach twist. "He's the one who notarized everything?" Benjamin nodded. "He disappeared 3 weeks ago. Closed his office, stopped answering calls, but before that he'd done multiple transactions for a man named Eric Bloom, one of Gavin's known debtors." I leaned forward. "So Gavin forged my signature, bribed a notary, and used a criminal contact to rush the sale." Benjamin sighed. "Exactly. And the paper trail shows your father authorized the bank transfer. That ties him directly to the fraud." Silence stretched. I rubbed at my temples, the tension vibrating beneath my skin. If this goes to court, they'll be ruined. Benjamin looked at me, not as a lawyer, but as a friend. "They did this to themselves, Hannah. You're not the villain here." That afternoon, I met Julie again. She had asked for one more meeting, this time at her apartment in Somerville. The place was small but tidy, the kind of order that comes from someone who's lived through chaos. She poured coffee, hands trembling slightly. I didn't tell you everything before, she said. Gavin owed Eric Bloom over $500,000. When he couldn't pay, they threatened to come after your family. He panicked, said he could sell your house without you knowing. He told your parents you'd given him permission. I sat frozen. And they just believed him? Julie gave a weak laugh. They always believed him, didn't they? That hit harder than she knew. She pulled out a file folder. Inside were printed messages, screenshots, a photo of a handwritten note. It's done. Hannah's out of the picture. Gee. I looked up sharply. When was this sent? 2 months ago, Julie said, to Eric Bloom, after the sale went through. The air in the room thickened. The words out of the picture echoed, vague but menacing. What does that mean? I asked. Julie shook her head. I don't know, but Eric's people aren't the kind who stop collecting. When I left her apartment, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Same car I'd seen near the cafe days ago. Dark windows, engine idling. My first thought was paranoia. The second was instinct. I pulled out my phone, snapped a quick photo of the license plate, and texted Benjamin. Do you know anyone who drives a black Chevy Impala? MA plate 7DL 239. Someone's following me. No reply. The car didn't move as I got into my own and pulled away. But when I checked the mirror a few blocks later, it was still there. I made a few deliberate turns, right, then left, through side streets. The Impala stayed 2 cars behind. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about the house anymore. Someone didn't want me uncovering the truth. I drove straight to Benjamin's office. He was waiting with a grim expression. I traced that plate, he said quietly. It's registered to Eric Bloom's shell company. My blood ran cold. Benjamin leaned forward. Hannah, listen. You need to stay somewhere else tonight. Somewhere secure. We'll get a restraining order and alert the police. Against who? I said bitterly. My brother, my father, or the man they owe? He hesitated. All of them, if we have to. I sat down, the exhaustion finally catching up. I can't believe this is my family. Benjamin's voice softened. Maybe you never really saw them. You saw who you hoped they were. That truth landed like a blow. Later, as we reviewed the case files together, Benjamin looked up. There's one more thing. The escrow account that handled the sale, it was opened in your father's name, but it's receiving deposits from an offshore account labeled GR Holdings. I frowned. GR? Gavin Ramsey, he said quietly. The realization snapped into place. Gavin had never been just the victim. He was orchestrating it. And the worst part, my parents still believed he was worth saving. As I left Benjamin's office that night, the city lights glimmered off the glass towers, cold and distant. I clutched the evidence file to my chest, feeling both powerful and terrified. I was no longer just the daughter wronged. I was a woman standing inside the blueprint of a crime, every line drawn by people who once claimed to love me. And if they thought I'd walk away quietly, they hadn't learned a damn thing about the person they'd built. The next morning, I didn't wake to sunlight. I woke to the vibration of my phone. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, dread, made me swipe. Hannah Walker? A male voice asked, low and unhurried. Yes, who is this? Pause. Then, you should stop asking questions about the house. My throat went dry. Who is this? You don't want to know, the man said. Walk away while you still can. And then the line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, phone pressed against my chest, heartbeat loud in my ears. The world outside looked normal. Coffee shops opening, a jogger passing by, but everything inside me had shifted. Someone was watching, someone powerful enough to think I'd listen to a threat. They didn't know me at all. By noon, I was back in Benjamin's office, voice shaking only slightly as I replayed the message on speaker. He swore under his breath, "That's Bloom's guy. He's done this before. Scare tactics to silence witnesses." So what do we do? Benjamin opened a folder. We file a protective order and bring this to Detective Mason at the Fraud Division. He's been tracking Bloom for years. He hesitated before adding, Hannah, this isn't just about property anymore. It's organized financial crime, and your family's right in the middle of it. That afternoon, I went to my parents' house. I told myself it was to warn them, but part of me needed to see if any of them looked afraid. My father was in the study, sleeves rolled up, papers scattered across the desk. He looked up when I entered, surprise flickering into irritation. Hannah, I thought we agreed you'd stay out of this. I got a call this morning, I said, my voice steady. Someone told me to stop asking questions. He froze, just for a second, but I saw it, the flicker, the guilt. Then he forced a smile. You're overreacting. Probably a scam. Is that what we're calling it now? I stepped closer. Because Benjamin found proof you wired money to an account connected to Eric Bloom. He slammed his fist down, startling me. Enough! You don't understand what's at stake. I took a breath. Then make me understand. He turned away, staring out the window. Your brother made mistakes, but he's still family. We had to protect him. By destroying me? Silence. I'd never seen him look so small. It was supposed to be temporary, he said finally. Once Gavin paid back the debt, we planned to transfer everything back. I laughed bitterly. Do you really believe he was ever going to do that? When I left, my mother followed me to the door. She looked older, her eyes swollen from crying. Hannah, she whispered, please don't go to the police. I turned to her. You're asking me to protect the man who stole my home. I'm asking you to protect what's left of this family. That line, the same one she'd used my entire childhood, hit a nerve. Protect the family. Stay quiet. Endure. I met her gaze. I did that for 30 years, and look what it got us. That night, Benjamin called. We got something, he said. Detective Mason pulled a financial record. Bloom's offshore account received a $50,000 transfer last week, from Gavin's name. It was labeled consulting fee. Consulting, I repeated. For what? Benjamin hesitated. We think he paid Bloom's man to threaten you. The room went silent, except for the sound of my breathing. My brother hadn't just betrayed me financially. He tried to scare me into silence. Something inside me, the part that still loved him, cracked. A week later, I went with Detective Mason to a small bar on the south side, where Gavin was rumored to be meeting Bloom's people. We waited outside in the unmarked car. Rain streaked down the windshield, blurring the neon lights. Then I saw him, Gavin. He looked thinner, nervous. He lit a cigarette, scanning the street. And then another man approached, broad shoulders, leather jacket, unmistakably the one from the Black Impala. I could hear Mason's voice through the radio. We have visual. But I wasn't listening. I opened the door and stepped out. Hannah, Mason hissed, but it was too late. Gavin's head snapped up. His eyes widened in horror. What the hell are you doing here? You paid them to threaten me. He shook his head, panicked. No, you don't understand. The other man turned sharply toward us. Mason was already out of the car, gun drawn, yelling, Police! The man bolted down the alley, but not before throwing something to Gavin, a small envelope. It hit the ground, splitting open. Inside were photos. Of me, leaving my apartment, sitting in my car, talking to Benjamin, every move documented. I stared at my brother. You let them follow me? His face crumpled. I didn't have a choice. They said if I didn't help them track you, they'd come after Mom and Dad. The truth landed like a blow, heavy, nauseating. Detective Mason cuffed him, reading his rights, but I barely heard. Gavin kept saying, I'm sorry, Lena, I'm sorry. But all I could think was, this wasn't about property anymore. It was about control, about loyalty twisted into leverage. And I wasn't running anymore. The investigation moved fast after that night. Gavin's arrest had cracked open everything. Accounts frozen, subpoenas flying. My parents' names suddenly threaded through documents they never thought anyone would read. Benjamin said it was a controlled burn, but it didn't feel controlled. It felt like watching my family dissolve, one affidavit at a time. 2 days later, he called me into his office. His tone was different, cautious, measured. Hannah, he said, Detective Mason found something. You'll want to hear this yourself. He handed me a small USB drive, unmarked except for a date, 06-14. We think Bloom's man recorded it during a meeting. Insurance in case your brother or father turned on him. I plugged it into Benjamin's laptop, my pulse loud in my ears. The audio crackled, then came a familiar voice. Gavin, we need more time. My sister's getting suspicious. Unknown male. She won't back off unless someone makes her. Another voice, my father's. Then make her. Just don't leave a trail. The sound of my father's voice hit like an electric current. Calm, cold, absolute. I pulled the headphones off, bile rising in my throat. He knew. Benjamin's face was grave. He didn't just know. He sanctioned it. That tape makes him complicit in witness intimidation, possibly conspiracy. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All those nights of him telling me to let it go, the way he'd avoided my eyes when I said I felt unsafe, it all made sense now. When the indictment came a week later, the news spread fast. Prominent Boston family under investigation for real estate fraud and bribery. My parents' names, my brother's face, all splashed across headlines. The townhouse, my home, was sealed by court order. For days, I couldn't bring myself to go near it. But one evening, as dusk fell over the city, I stood across the street from it. The windows were dark, the for sale sign stripped away. It looked like an empty stage where too many scenes had played out. Benjamin joined me quietly. "You did the right thing," he said. I didn't answer. My voice felt lodged in my throat. He added softly, "The DA wants you to testify. Your statement, plus the recording, can close this case." I nodded. "Then I'll testify." The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and nerves. When I took the stand, Gavin wouldn't meet my eyes. My father, sitting beside him, looked straight ahead, stone, as always. The prosecutor played the audio file. That single line, "then make her," echoed through the room like a death sentence. My mother sobbed quietly into her hands. When it was over, I said the only thing I could. I thought family meant protection. I was wrong. It meant silence. No one spoke after that. The verdict came 2 weeks later. Gavin took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison. My father faced obstruction and conspiracy charges awaiting sentencing. My mother left Boston without saying goodbye. 1 month later, I stood inside my empty townhouse again. The court had restored ownership to me after the investigation closed, but it didn't feel like victory. The walls still remembered too much. I ran my hand across the banister I'd built myself, the one Gavin used to lean on as we argued about whose life had gone more wrong. Benjamin arrived with a small envelope. "From the DA's office," he said. Inside was a check. Restitution. Partial compensation for the stolen sale. I stared at it for a long time, then I folded it in half. "I don't want their money," I said quietly. "I just want my name back." That night, I sat beneath the skylight I'd fought so hard for, the city quiet beyond the glass. I thought about everything that had been lost, and what was finally, painfully mine again. The truth had cost me my family, but it had also given me something I'd never had before, freedom unanchored from anyone else's lies. I whispered into the dark, "This house was never yours to take." And for the first time, it felt like the walls agreed. Winter came early that year, sharp, gray, and quiet. The city felt suspended in ice, and for once, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I had started teaching part-time at a design school, easing back into a life that belonged only to me. No phone calls from lawyers, no reporters outside my door, just work, light, and space. Then, one morning in December, a letter arrived. The return address stopped me cold. Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury. Sender, Gavin Ramsey. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Hannah, I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to understand what really happened. It wasn't about money, not entirely. Dad was being blackmailed. Years ago, long before you bought the townhouse, he took money from one of Bloom's shell accounts to cover the hospital bills after Mom's accident. He thought he could pay it back quietly. He couldn't. Bloom owned him after that. When the debts came due, Bloom said he'd expose everything unless Dad handed over something big, something clean. Your property was the only asset in your name, untouched by the old mess. I didn't want to drag you into it. I told myself I'd fix it, that I'd find a way to get the deed back before you ever knew. But Bloom wanted proof the house was his to sell. That's when I forged your signature. You always said I ran from things. This time, I ran straight into hell. I know you think Dad didn't love you. Maybe he didn't know how. But I swear he tried to protect you in his own twisted way. The recording only caught the part where he was desperate. I'm not asking you to visit. Just keep the house. Don't let it become another debt. G. The paper trembled slightly in my hands. It didn't absolve him, or my father, but it shifted something. The betrayal hadn't come from greed alone. It had come from fear, layered and inherited, passed down like a family heirloom. I sat for a long time, the letter spread out on the kitchen table, the morning light spilling over it. Then I folded it once and placed it in the drawer beside the house keys. That night, I climbed up to the roof where the city lights bled into the snow. I looked through the skylight, that small square of sky I'd fought for, and whispered, "It ends with me." No more secrets, no more saving anyone from their own wreckage. Just me, my home, my name. Spring returned months later. The townhouse smelled of paint and new beginnings. I had rebuilt the shelves, restained the floors, and opened the windows wide. Benjamin stopped by with coffee. "You look different," he said. "Lighter," I told him. He smiled. "You're keeping the house?" I nodded. "Yes, but not as a monument." He raised a brow. "Then as what?" "A reminder," I said, "that family can break you, but it doesn't have to define you." Outside, the afternoon light poured through the glass, just as I'd imagined it years ago. This time it didn't just touch the room, it filled it.